It's lunchtime here at Kinrara Oval, and we've seen a very, very entertaining morning of cricket. Stephen Blow here for herecricket.com, and we are the official audio broadcast partner for the ICC Under-19 Cricket World Cup. And by the magic of the internet, we are going out over the internet to all countries in the world. So please pick up, and if the chat room can pick up, we can also take some questions from people over the chat room. So please get onto your internet websites and get your questions ready. I have with me Mr. Colin Miller. Colin Miller, welcome to herecricket.com broadcast studio.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to be in here.
Thank you. And so, Colin, if we could just talk a little bit about your career in cricket, and a very interesting one, as I've discovered through doing a little bit of research this morning. And firstly, and let me just try to do this in the early part, you always developed the name of Funky, and everybody knew you by that name. So could you tell us how that name actually originated?
Yeah, well, it's a boring story, really. People like to think this is because I like to go out late at night and have the occasional puff on a cigarette and have a Johnny Walker occasionally, but it comes from a rap song by an American rapper by the name of Tone Loc back in the mid-80s, 86, 87, I think, about that time of the decade. And I used to play the song in the rooms all the time when I was playing for South Australia, and Darren Berry, who was had 1 year playing for South Australia when we stole him out of the academy. He had 1 year, then went back to Victoria, just started calling me Funky, and it stuck for 20 years.
And is it still with you now?
I still get called Funky. Not many people call me Colin these days. It's Funky to all my friends. My mum calls me Colin. My dad calls me Colin. That's about it these days.
That's about it, okay. I had assumed that it was to do with your tradition of coming out with a different hairstyle every time we saw you playing cricket in the old days. Yeah,
well, the hair didn't start really until 2000. The Federation Test in Sydney, Australia v West Indies. And that's when I first dyed my hair blue. I don't know why. I had a bored moment, a bit of a vision of I never played one-day cricket for Australia, and I had been saying to the boys that summer I got 22 Test wickets in that series against West Indies, and I thought it was a fair chance to play one-day cricket that year. And all I was thinking was day night at MCG, 75,000 Victorians supporting one of their own, being a Victorian myself, and the yellow uniform and maybe yellow or green hair. And Steve Bernard, the team manager, named the one-day squad after the first day of that Test match. He wasn't going to release it to the media until after the Test match finished. And he read the 14 names out. Mine wasn't there. And a few of the boys in the rooms, gave me a bit of a nudge in the ribs and said, "What are you going to do now about your hair? You've been threatening all summer." So I got the room attendant at the SCG to call the concierge at the hotel, who called a hairdresser that night. And she just happened to bring in blue. She could have brought in green or purple or pink, which all colours have all had, by the way, subsequently. But she happened to bring in blue, and it all started from there. I created a monster from that day onwards.
And you became very famous for that, but perhaps not as famous as your cricketing exploits as well. For those who might like to know, Colin is sitting across from me in the commentary box with fairly ordinary coloured hair, I think kind of dark brown, and doesn't look like it's seen a bottle for some years, Colin.
It is dyed dark brown. There's a lot of grey on my head these days, and I have a beautiful young girl in Melbourne that does my hair for me. Okay. And I had it done just before I arrived in Malaysia, so just to touch it up. You never know we're going to be on TV.
Thank you for that background information. Colin Miller, who is a Test cricketer for Australia, and 18 Test matches, 69 wickets at 26.15, which is a pretty good average by today's standards, an economy rate of 2.64, which is also an extremely good economy rate. But before we get to your Test career, Colin, can you just tell us a little bit about the early days, where you learnt your cricket and how it was developed, who encouraged you?
Yeah, I grew up in Melbourne, western suburbs of Melbourne, in a place called Sunshine. And my first experience of cricket was really probably watching my brother, well, my dad probably initially, and my brother, who's 4 years older than me. My father, Ralph, played cricket right up until his mid-50s, and then still umpires now. It's his birthday today.
Happy birthday,
he
Dad.
turns, I think,
Mr.
74,
Miller?
if I'm correct, but he still umpires on the weekends.
Awesome.
In the local cricket competition. He loves the game of cricket, and he pushed, well, he didn't really push, I think it was a natural thing for my brother and I to go into the game. And my brother played a lot of first grade cricket in Melbourne, and it was actually me who took his spot at Footscray, which was our district club. But I was really a baseballer. It was my main interest until probably the age of 16, 16 and a half. And I wanted to go to America and go to college and play Major League Baseball, but I got glandular fever when I was 16 and missed out on national championships in Australia, and hence missed out on getting any chance of getting a contract in America. So I stopped playing baseball and really started playing cricket seriously at about 16 years of age.
And you were playing first grade in Melbourne?
Not until I was 18.
Right.
I was about 18 and a half. I made my first grade debut.
And how about youth development programs? I mean, you're a little bit previous to the time that we had these under-19 World Cups and so on. So what to you was the main factor in your cricket development?
Well, I played representative schoolboys at under 16 level, and then I played state under 19 cricket, which is going back a long way now. It's nearly 25 years ago. And I missed out on the Australian team, and that team then had one tour to England, which was really available for under 19 players in those days, 25 years ago. And I think the boys went over there for probably a 6-week tour and played what they call junior test, what they call them these days, and maybe a couple of one days. But that's really all the recognition you got as an under 19 cricketer to show yourself to the world, as opposed to what we're watching here for this week and the next couple of weeks. The best young players in the world, and that's why I'm loving being here, because we can sit and watch these boys play, and everyone at home on the internet or on TV can watch these as well, and hopefully in 2 or 3 years' time they'll be playing with the big boys in the test arena. Yes,
indeed, and some of them already playing first-class cricket, as we know. And I thought Kohli today looks a very, very mature cricketer, and he cracked 100, and he was always determined that that's what he was going to do today.
Well, he went for a run of ball up till he was about 55, ended up getting his 100 off the 74 balls, and really accelerated at the right time. And so many of these young Indian boys who have got first-class experience, and it really shows with their composure at the crease. They look a class above some of the other players. There are obviously good players in other teams,
correct,
but these boys are very, very composed.
Just getting back to Colin Miller, your early days, I was looking at Cricinfo and Wisdom, and it referred to you as a cricketing journeyman, which was a phrase that I hadn't quite associated with you, so maybe you could help to explain that. But I thought it was probably not such a relevant phrase when I see that you made the record for your state for Tasmania after you, in the later stages of your cricketing state career, 12 for 119, when you broke the record of L.O.B. Chuck Fleetwood Smith, which had stood for 63 years, so that was a great record. And yet Wisdom calls you a cricketing journeyman. I don't quite see the connection.
Yeah, well, I started in 85, 86. I played 3 of the last 4 games of the season, and then the following season I was dropped from the squad completely. And in those days, you didn't really get told by a selector. I actually picked up the paper the next May, getting ready for the pre-season training with the Victorian squad, and you read it in the newspaper and my name wasn't there. And I still, to this day, haven't been told why I was dropped from that squad. So that next summer I just played club cricket in Melbourne. Then I still thought I could play, I'd had the taste, and I thought I could play first-class cricket. And so I drove myself to Adelaide and had a weekend over there, and then spent Monday and Tuesday looking for a job, and had 2 or 3 job interviews, and drove back to Melbourne on the Thursday, got a phone call on the Friday saying I got a job working for a local newspaper selling advertising, and had to ring my girlfriend and say, look, I'm moving to South Australia. I don't think it's a good idea if you come. I'm going to purely play cricket. And so I spent 4 years playing for South Australia between 87 and 91, and then really only played I think 25 or 26 games for South Australia in that 4 years. I was leading wicket taker in Australia 1 year. Really wasn't getting any recognition, and then to further my career I thought I'd need to move again, and I was in and out of the team. I was playing South Australia, and Tasmania looked like a good opportunity for me, so I moved down to Tasmania and spent the next 8 years in Tasmania, which is where I really owed my whole career to. They gave me the chance to play regular first class cricket, and also, of course, where I started bowling spin in 1997. Well,
on that subject, that's a very interesting topic, and let's move on to that one. You are one of the very few cricketers who's made a total transformation of your cricket. And when you started cricket, you were an opening bowler, able to move the ball both ways, and as I can see in front of me now, a man with big shoulders and plenty of height. So obviously a very penetrating and difficult quick bowler to play. But some stage in your career you decided to bowl off breaks, and that was really where you made your mark in senior cricket. Can you tell us about that transformation?
The 8 years I in Tasmania, we had a fantastic batting team. Jamie Cox and Dean Hills, who made 1,000 runs each in probably 4 consecutive seasons. Ricky Ponting at 3, David Boone at 4, Michael Divenuto at 5, Sean Young at 6, Mark Atkinson, wicketkeeper, at 7. We could chase down any target set for us at Bellerive. Is probably one of the flattest wickets in the world. But we couldn't bowl teams out, so we couldn't dominate teams. And we didn't have a spinner. We had myself and Mark Ridgway and Jerry Denton, who now plays for Victoria, and several other medium pacers. And I said to David Boone at the end of the 86-87 season, 96-97 season, I'm trying to age myself 20 years,
yep,
that I think next year I should bowl some spin as well as bowl medium pace. I'd been mucking around with it for years, just in club cricket in England, only bowling it for an over here and there, but I knew I could do it, and I knew I could turn the ball naturally without having worried too much. And I had pretty good control. And David said, go away again this winter. So I went back to the UK, and I bowled probably only 2 or 3 hours of spin. I was signed as a medium pace bowler for that club. And I came back and got David out twice in a couple of warm-up games, and he said, well, off you go then. For the first game of the year, I opened the bowling and then bowled spin just before lunch, and that season in 11 games ended up bowling, I think, 770 overs, and that's the season I broke the record for Chuck Fleetwood Smith. I got 67 wickets and bowled a lot of overs, but it really, within 5 months of bowling my first ball of spin in first class cricket, I was now picked as the Australian off-spin bowler.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. And I think, to transform yourself and to become an international cricketer in such a very short space of time, I can't think of any other cricketer who's done this kind of thing. Well,
a lot of it's being in the right place at the right time. There was no off-spinner playing for Australia. Gavin Robertson had been given a go and hadn't been overly successful. Off-spinner from New South Wales. Greg Matthews had passed his use by date. Tim May had gone. So there was really nobody else. And with Shane Warne, that period of time that I played, had a lot of injury problems. He had a shoulder reconstruction. He broke a couple of fingers. He was injured in and out of the team. So it just worked that myself and Stuart McGill got to play for that 3.5-4 year period. We got to do most of the bowling as a spinners. So it's the luck of the draw. Had I been 5 years earlier or 5 years later, I might not have got a game. But I just seemed to be right in the right place at the right time, and just the perfect time to stop bowling all the outswingers and start bowling some little spinners.
And you made your Test debut in 1998 at the age of 34. And you were playing in Rawalpindi. And during that game, you and McGill took the Pakistan batting apart. I think McGill got 9 wickets and you got 3 or 4. That must have been an amazing experience to make your Test debut in such a fanatic cricketing environment.
Yeah, it was awesome. And it was obviously my first tour. I'd just been picked earlier in that summer to go away to Ireland and Scotland with an Australian A team. It was basically preceding the tour straight away, and so to arrive in Pakistan was a bit overawing because you got to see guns for the first time.
Oh yes.
Surrounded by security and the guys carrying machine guns around, and police being escorting the bus to the ground in the mornings, and security in the hotel, and having to go through the metal detector in the hotel to make sure there's nothing going on. So that was a bit unusual for me, a little bloke from the western suburbs of Melbourne. But to get picked for my first Test, I didn't play the 2 warm-up games, and I was a bit worried. I'm thinking to myself, though, you're not going to pick a 34.5-year-old not play him in the away series. So in the back of my mind, I was reasonably confident I was going to get a game. And Mark Taylor, the captain at the time, won the toss, and we bowled on day one. And I ended up bowling medium pace just before lunch on day one. Mark Taylor said, get the nerves out of your system, have a bowl. I was bowling to Salam Malik. And my 5th ball, my first over, Salam nicked one, thankfully, for me to second slip, and Mark Taylor took a nice catch at low at second slip. So my 5th ball of first international cricket, I'd 1 for none on my first over. I thought, how easy is this stuff?
Excellent.
I got 1 for 83 that day, I think. It got a bit harder after the first over.
After lunch it gets more difficult. Okay. So after that debut in 98, your best bowling performance came a couple of years later against the West Indies in Adelaide, and 5 for 32 in one innings, and the match results of 10 for 113. What are your memories of that game?
That was the first game that I probably felt like a real Australian cricketer. In that team I played, that's in the period where we won 16 consecutive Tests, and Really, we were a good team, and we were dominating teams all around the world. And I was picking up my 2 and 3 wickets here and there, and getting a 20 or 30 occasionally with the bat, but never really dominating a team. And I always dreamt of getting a man of the match award, and that test I did. I think I got the 5 for 72 in the first innings and 5 in the second innings, all with spin. And got Brian Lara out both innings, and just bowled really well. And to get man of the match and know in yourself that you've helped your country win a test match, for me it was a very special feeling. So it's a test match I'll always hold close.
And what was the special factor during that day? Was the ball spinning a lot, or did you have a particular flash of excellence on that particular day? Or what was the reason for being so successful on that day?
Well, one of the strengths I had as an off-spin bowler was my accuracy. And Stuart McGould also played that test, and I think Brian Lara and the West Indian boys saw Stuart as more of a threat than me, and they really went after Stuart, and he got belted around the park quite a bit. But I was also quite a quick off-spinner. I bowled an average about 95 Ks with an arm ball that was about 112, 115, so batsmen couldn't get at me, they couldn't run at me, because I got good drift from the ball, so the right-handers were scared of running past the ball. And Brian Lara was too busy hitting Stuart around, as he was too tight to hit me around. So I just had a good day. The wicket Adelaide Oval turns. Yep. Some days there's a spin of the ball that fits in your hand nicely and it comes out beautifully, and you get that rhythm going. You just want to bowl all day long. And both innings in that game, I just felt really good, felt really confident. And in that series, I got 22 wickets in 3 tests. And the West Indies traditionally don't play spin bowling that well, so I probably got a team that probably didn't enjoy playing spin as well.
Right. And from your batting perspective, as you say, you used to always be a very stubborn batsman towards the tail end of the order. A top score of 43 also against the West Indies, so I think you must have victimised them. But what number did you bat when you were in the team?
I was number 10, because thankfully we had Glenn McGrath on the team. He batted number 11, although Glenn did bat number 10 in one game in New Zealand in '99 when Steve Ball was having some fun with us, and he made me bat number 11 and Glenn bat number 10, but thankfully Glenn made a first ball duck, so he was back to number 11 for the second dig. You
must have thought that was a pretty unjust move by the captain.
Well, look, I wasn't really that phased. 10 or 11 doesn't really matter these days, and it probably matters more so these days, rather than, the game changes so quickly, and it's been 6 years since I played cricket now, and there are no bunnies in the game. It's very rare to see a bunny in the game of cricket these days. All these kids that you see in this level, they're all taught to bat at their own academies around the world, and so you just don't see those blokes that can't bat anymore. Not that Glenn couldn't bat. He has a first class 50, which I don't have. So if you're listening, Glenn, you are a much better player than I am. But I have got a 43 into my name, and I was pretty happy against Ambrose and Walsh. So.
Glenn's just come on the chat room and he says there's a cheque in the mail. So yes, good words there for Glenn McGrath. Tell me now a little bit about after Test cricket, because when you finish Test cricket, and I think this is a challenge for all cricketers, you're going to be in your mid-30s, or in your case, mid to late 30s, and you've been playing cricket all of your life, it's been your life, then you have to make some kind of a change in your career. So you've moved into broadcasting. What were the steps, and how did you do that?
Well, like all players, I didn't actually retire. It's suggested to you that you're not playing anymore. And then about 3 months later, you actually come up and you say, "Well, I officially retire now."
Is this when you read it in the newspaper that your name's
basically
not there?
You're not there anymore? And so I was actually pushed into retirement by Victoria, my state team.
Yep.
I was still a contracted Australian player, but they got their young Cameron White coming through the grades, who is now captain of Victoria, and
yep.
also came through as captain of the under-19 Australian team, and a fine leg spin bowler, batsman, probably more of a batsman than a leg, and he'll admit that himself. He's more of a batsman than a bowler. And for the first year, after playing professional cricket for 17 years, and remembering when I wasn't playing for Australia, prior to that I spent 6 months a year in the UK or in Holland playing cricket. So you miss out on your mates for 15 or 16 years. So for the first 18 months after retiring, I just caught up with my mates and played golf and went to the beach and went to a pub on a Friday night and didn't have to wake up in the morning and go to training, and just caught up, made old friends again and make them new friends again, and I think it's really important to do that, to just walk away from the game as well. And then I got asked by Cricket Australia to get involved with the umpires, and I became a national umpire selector for 2 seasons. That was 2 years after I retired, and that was interesting again. Got me watching the game again, travelling around Australia watching the umpires, but also seeing the new kids come through the grades on the state teams and the second 11 teams in Australia. And then beach cricket appeared in Australia, and I got asked to commentate on that for the last 2 years.
Right.
And so that's been a new avenue for me to go down. And then this is my first gig with ESPN here in Malaysia, and I'm loving it. And it's something I'd like to do more of in the future. It's something I'm enjoying doing, and particularly at this level, just to see these young kids come through, it's amazing.
Yeah, it is magnificent to see these young players. Just one of the things that has occupied the headlines in cricket over the last few weeks is the emergence of IPL as a significant force in cricket. And we've seen I think they had a false start about a year ago, and it's restarted, and it really is happening this time. And we're seeing some players like Gilchrist and McGrath, and they're probably very happy at the end of their careers to go and make what in a few weeks what they would make in a year. So I think it's very good for them. But what's your thinking? I'm old enough to remember the Kerry Packer and the disruption that caused. Do you see this being similar sort of disruption to world cricket?
Well, the main difference is Kerry Packer took players out of international cricket and started his own international cricket in direct opposition to the traditional form of the game. The IPL, they've got a window in there. It's only a small window, and you can only look down the future and think that the ICC at some stage in their future programming, if this IPL is successful, and it's going to have to be because they've signed 10-year deals and billion-dollar television rights deals, and teams have been bought for up to $120 million, so it's not going to fail after 1 year. They won't be allowed to, and the TV money in there won't let it happen. I think it's great for the players to be able to, at 33, 34, to spend another 3 years, if they've been in the Australian team or the Indian team, whatever Pakistan team, done this service like Adam Gilchrist has, played 8 or 9 years for Australia at 35 years of age. Why not go and get your retirement fund?
But what about those who have not yet finished their career? And I'm thinking of people like Ponting and Simons, for example, who I think are a tremendous value to the Australian team. And frankly, I'd hate to see some kind of contractual conflict disrupt what is perhaps the most fertile years of their cricket career.
Well, the interesting thing from players all around the world is they're crying out now that there's so much cricket being played, and they're asking for rotation systems in the team. They're asking for longer rest breaks between test series. Now, in Australia, just use Australia as an example, they go to Pakistan this March, April, if the tour goes ahead, and then straight from there they go into the West Indies. So Australia players really won't play for the first years of the IPL. But if it happened to be this year, well, in 3 years' time, when summer finishes in Australia, and they're crying out for that 6 or 8 week break, but you throw $1 million at someone, and they're going to all of a sudden be not as tired as they were when they were just playing for $1 million over 2 years.
Yes, correct.
$1 million. Andrew Simons was just signed for $1.35 million for 44 days' work for a 3-year contract. There's a young guy in Victoria, David Hussey, hasn't played international cricket yet, was signed for $650,000 a year. Now that makes that guy now, David Hussey, is now earning $1 million a year. He plays county cricket on a regular basis. He'd be on one of the better contracts in Victoria, and he's a non-international player. Now I think that's a little bit dangerous to have non-international players earning $1 million a year out of the game, because then where's your incentive to want to play for your country?
Yes, exactly. That's one of the things I'm worried about.